first love. time to waste. Those days are gone. Let's walk away to build our life together. We find a place where everything is joyful. We walked away to flee the one we first loved.
Welcome to Unite yet again. It's been a year, and thanks for making it to Vancouver. So it's a lot of stuff to cover today, but I was just watching the trailer, and you know, this year we picked a whole bunch of games that we thought were really cool, and they looked awesome, and the trailer was a couple of minutes. But we could have also gone crazy and taken any of the other awesome games that you guys have been building. It's pretty overwhelming at this point. And even if we had gone and made the trailer 10, 15 minutes long, we still wouldn't have covered even a fraction of what's going on out there. And by the way, these are just the logos that we sort of know of and we can pick out. If you count beyond that, it just goes on forever. I mean, we know of thousands of games that have been built with Unity, or at least we can measure it statistically. And beyond that, we know there's tens of thousands of internal builds, hobby projects, game jam projects, and that's not including all the serious projects, all the research, all the visualization, and so on. It's completely overwhelming. I remember the days when we would be really proud that there were like 3 cool games in that year. It's completely stunning. So thanks for that. Thanks for being with us. Now, we got a lot of material to cover today. We're going to talk about, well, kind of a recap of the last year. We're going to talk about a few things we're doing, and then of course we're going to show you some technology from the lab. As always, we've been working really, really hard. And whenever I go anywhere where we have engineers, which is a lot of places now, I find people working day and night and really kind of spending all the energy they have to solve your problems and create new features and really think deeply through what is needed by the game industry and what is needed by you guys. But before going to these kind of updates, Unity is, well, the community is a fantastic place, and we work really hard to make Unity the best it can be. But that absolutely cannot account for all the energy that we see here. If you look around at the game industry, we're kind of newcomers to the game industry. We've only been part of it for, well, a few years, 5 years if you want to be generous to the early days. But when we look around and when we talk to people that have been part of the industry for much longer than we have, everyone agrees that the game industry has never been this healthy and kind of bursting with energy and vitamins. So, I think it's interesting to kind of ask ourselves, why all this energy? Like, why is it so that things are so, well, they're not just great, they're competitive and crazy, but also really awesome. And, I've been thinking about this for a while, and one of the really interesting points that I kind of picked up along the way was, well, it's a young industry, right? So I was so lucky earlier this year that I met one of the kind of founding fathers of it, a guy called Nolan Bushnell, who amongst many other crazy things in his life was the founder of Atari, which is, well, a defining company for the industry. And what he sort of shared with me was the idea that all entertainment is kind of driven by an innovation cycle. Whereby people come up with new ideas, new technologies, new modes of storytelling, et cetera, and that this innovation cycle, which is different, by the way, between different forms of media, also defines the kind of half-life of entertainment, right? So if we just think through some of these different types of media, I think it's enlightening and helps at least me understand a little bit better what's going on. So let's look at music, Music has a long half-life, a long shelf life. Some music we still love after, well, decades or even hundreds of years, while some music kind of starts sounding dated, after maybe 10 years, I think it's fair to say. That can be because of the production, it can be because of lyrics that sound silly at some point, it can be the beat, it can be everything. So I think it's, let's just assume that music has a half-life of 10 to 1,000 years. This has some interesting properties. One of them is, for instance, that if you're a musician today, you're actually competing with the Beatles, which really, really sucks. And it also means that the back catalog, as they call it in music, has an incredible amount of value. And whatever value you bring as a new musician is kind of very, very fractional compared to that. Now, if you look at another form of medium that we all love, film, I think it's fair to say that, a lot of films last kind of for a while. And of course, this does not include some golden oldies that we kind of keep loving even after they are really kind of outmoded. But action movies in particular, technology-driven movies, start looking dated after sort of 5-10 years. And pretty much all movies really feel old after 25 years. And that can be the editing, it can be the characterization, and of course, the special effects and all that stuff. So if we move on to games, let's go first to kind of big, whether it's console games or big PC games. I think and I've argued about this with a lot of people, but I think it's fair to say that most of these bigger games start feeling pretty dated after, well, pretty much all of them feel dated after 5 years. And some of them actually kind of start looking slightly old after 2 years. Again, much shorter cycle. But then let's move on to mobile games and games on kind of many of the new platforms. We'll lump them together. And I think it's fair to say that some of them already start feeling slightly dated after 6 months, 9 months for sure, many of them. And I can't think of any mobile game that feels fresh after 2 years. In my opinion, you can argue back and forth, but I think the general trend is very clear. Now, that's kind of scary because it means that whatever you build now will start feeling dated soon. And by the way, dated comes from the graphics, but it also comes from the controls. It comes from how you charge the player. It comes from how you sort of integrate social mechanics and so on. So it's kind of the whole experience, I think. And one of the kind of results of this is that you can say that the shorter the half-life of a form of medium, the more power the creator holds. Not saying it's not competitive, not saying it's not crazy, but basically if you're making a game today, you're really only competing against the person who is building a game at the same time. And that's kind of an interesting position to be in. It leads to a lot of things. For instance, all the publishers and platforms, they need you kind of tomorrow. Whatever they have now is kind of already rotting on the shelves. I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much energy in our space. Another obvious one, of course, is the device explosion that's been happening. And just to put it in a little bit of context, I think it's kind of neat to look back at the sort of, the last really big explosion, which is the PC explosion. And if you go all the way back to, the Apple I, 76 comes out. I think it's built in 200 copies. And then fast forward to the moment that we can call the kind of peak PC moment, the year that the most PCs were ever sold. The number of shipped PCs is dropping dramatically. Of course, the install base can remain intact for a while, but it's definitely only coasting at best. And this took, well, let's say 36 years, and we got to 1.5 billion, devices out there. So compare that with the smartphones. First smartphones come out, depending on how generous you want to be to the early players, somewhere during last decade. And at this point, we're looking at around 2 billion units. And in the next 5 years, we'll pretty much go to 6 billion units. The exact shape of the curve can be argued about, but there's no doubt about the general trend. And the whole thing will have taken, at most, 15 years, which, 4 times the install base, half the time. You can kind of do this calculation, and basically this means that the curve we're in is going to be 8 times as steep. And since we're 2 billion devices in, we're kind of entering the sharpest part of that curve right now. So the last couple of years have been crazy. The next 3-5 years will be at least as crazy, which again is injecting all this energy into the world we occupy. If you just look at the sort of top grossing game, which is not the whole thing. It's actually only good for a few people, but it's still interesting to look at. Top grossing game, these are estimates, but I think they're pretty robust. So you go with 1 million, 4 million, 15, 30, 120, and it is estimated that there's at least 1 or 2 games this year that'll do 500 million. Next year, who knows? Nothing can keep growing like that forever, but it means that, again, the people that really knock it out of the park are, well, very lucky and smart. But that's good for them. If we look at the kind of longer tail, and the data for this is hard to come by, but all the analysis we've done kind of tells us that things are at least okay. So let's look at some data. If you look at it by engagement, established players versus indie players, 2010, 11, and 12. You actually see indies kind of fall back a bit in 11, according to the data, but bounce back in 12, and are at least in as good a state as they were a couple of years ago. This year, we don't have data, but our sense is that it's not getting worse, at least. This is by engagement, so play sessions, that's only one way of measuring success. Another is, of course, the revenue. So here we sorted it out by the revenue generated by the top 25 games in the App Store, the next 100, and then all the others. And you can actually see that while the numbers in absolute were growing ridiculously, they were actually also spreading out. So the top grossing games were generating half the share that they were doing a couple of years before. Again, just means that there is so much opportunity and energy being injected into this, and whoever moves really fast has a chance. Now, another interesting kind of mechanism, which I think follows from some of the other trends, is that you might say that whatever worked last year is not going to work this year. And this leads to a few things. It leads to the fact that what often happens in industries, which is consolidation, is that success begets success begets success. We're kind of seeing the opposite. We're almost seeing success as an anti-predictor of future success. And that's kind of scary for people who build established companies, but it's pretty awesome for all the newcomers, and it's pretty awesome for all the small teams that are in basements. Of course, this follows from the fact that everything has to be kind of be created anew. There's so much innovation going on that in order to keep on top of things, first you have to be leaning really forward, and then you probably have to be innovating yourselves. And if you look at all the kind of biggest hits, they're all kind of innovative or new in some ways. Copycats can be successful, but definitely not as successful as the others. There's a race to quality, very clearly. It's kind of always going on. It gets reset from time to time when we get new platforms. But then, it starts happening, and we see, the products you're building following an amazing curve. And of course, we're trying to keep up with technology. And all these things kind of lead to only, I think, one conclusion. And that is that it's times like this when really big changes happen. And you can see it how a lot of the big publishers and developers are, either struggling or dead. And a lot of new companies are coming out of the ground. And you can actually see, like, a lot of the companies we're thinking of as the big companies now are, like, 3-5 years old. The only conclusion we can come to is to go absolutely nuts. Like, it's just there for the taking, and the only way to kind of get out there is to do it and move really fast. And of course, we do whatever we can to help you with that. And I actually regard, Unity as being very much about supporting this. Now, that was sort of the surroundings. Let's go and talk about a few updates, a few things we've been doing as Unity. I think I can say we've been taking this advice to go nuts. So, as of a year ago, we had spread out to a lot of different places. We started in Copenhagen. Oh, let's see here. We started in Copenhagen. We opened up in Lithuania, another office in Lithuania. We opened up in San Francisco. We built an office in Brighton. We had later built an office in Japan, Korea, and China. So this was kind of where we were at. Now, we didn't leave it at that. So since last year, we went and opened up in Stockholm, Seattle, Montreal, Boston, Bogota in Canada, in Colombia, sorry. Helsinki in Finland. We opened an office in Berlin. We opened up in Odessa in Ukraine. And we opened a pretty sizable office in Singapore, of all places. So at this point, we're completely spread out, and we're really trying to be everywhere. On top of that, whenever we find fantastic people that we just have to work with, we bring them on board. So, the map you see here will soon include kind of all the individuals that we met across the world who are awesome. So we're this completely distributed, ridiculously coupled and decoupled company. And one of the fantastic things about that is that we can be close to you kind of wherever you are, and often just next door. So we also did another really kind of big move, and that is that we decided to be free on mobile. In 2009, we kind of braved it and made the previous indie version of Unity free, and that felt fantastic. We were finally able to give at least a version of our tools out to a lot of people. That brought our community up to 2 million people, which is kind of staggering. And this year we said, let's do it again. Let's do it on mobile. So we took all our $400 products and made them free. And that was iOS and Android earlier this year. And then as of very recently, that was also Windows Phone and BlackBerry 10. So basically, free mobile tools available to developers everywhere, including in places with not a lot of money, to build games and eventually game studios and livelihoods for themselves. So I think that's something we're extremely proud of. Now, we did another thing that I think is really cool, which also kind of supports this idea of pushing Unity out there. We had been working on it for a while, so we launched what we call the Learn site. It's already a pretty solid repository of high-quality learning materials, tutorials, and really sort of pedagogically well put together material. I think we're only at, I don't know, 10, 15% of the final result. We started with beginner material, but we're going to go crazy and trying to kind of have material for almost every person, every need within the next couple of years. And we're really pushing forward on that. Another thing we really worked on is putting Unity into schools. So it's been happening kind of organically for a long time. And this year we're just kind of stepping on the pedal. The Learn material is kind of going into that. And we now see Unity used in 71 countries across, roughly counted, but we feel pretty confident about the number, 2,000 schools. And that's, universities, various other types of higher ed. It's high schools, it's kind of education on camps, and actually some really interesting kind of educational startups that have it as a goal to teach, either kids or people of kind of lesser means programming. And the early sort of successes of some of these are really high. So that's something we're super excited about. And just as kind of a proxy for how, how this is going, in the Unity Awards, we have 70 students projects submitted, and some of them are, well, you'll see them tomorrow. They're pretty fantastic. So as you see, there's all this, we always have this pattern of trying to find new ways of getting Unity out there to people. One of the things that we found is that a lot of people have a hard time with our kind of full price points. People's cash flows aren't such that they can plunk down for all the licenses they need. So we also launched a subscription service for Unity earlier this year. We weren't really sure, well, we knew people wanted it because a lot of people asked us. We also heard kind of a negative feedback. People were worried about it. People told us it was a bad deal. We put it out at $75 per month after a lot of thinking and analysis and so on and so forth. And actually, in this kind of test period, which was for a few months, the results were really amazing. So at this point, over 50% of the people who buy Unity on our website are buying the subscription. I think that counts as a success. It also means that there's, I don't know, 40-something maybe percent of the people that are buying the full license. So of course, the clear message is, people want to be able to do that too. So right now, we've just said, we're keeping both models. They feel great. They solve different problems. But basically, if your cash flow is such that you can't afford the full prices, you can do the subscription. It's awesome. It really works, and we're going to keep it. Another thing that we've been really, really excited about for the last 3 years since it launched is, of course, the asset store. Our dear, dear asset store. What can I say? When it launched, it wasn't clear how it would go, but it's become this really amazing kind of repository for game development assets of all sorts. And I feel pretty certain in saying it's the world's biggest and highest quality repository of supporting assets for game creation. And, just take it in. It's almost anything you need, you can find in there at this point. Yeah, the video keeps going. It's really crazy. So how does it look today? We've got 400,000 users of it. There's 8,000 packages in there, and we're getting more and more packages every day. We're also getting more and more users. It's pretty overwhelming. We've been hiring people to manage this process, vet the assets, communicate with the sellers, and so on. We've had periods where it was overwhelming. I think we're on top of it now. There will be a day when we're not on top of it anymore. But what is completely staggering, and by the way, we love it for all kinds of reasons. We love it because it's educational. People can go and see what's possible. People can buy or download. There's a lot of free stuff in there as well. People can buy or download assets that either help them solve a problem right now or teach them how to solve that problem. A lot of these are source assets, and you can work with them kind of as you want. But what is also really touching is that whereas in the beginning we saw some people make hundreds of dollars, then some of these sellers were making thousands of dollars, and many of them are, by the way, individual users or really small companies that are supporting themselves with this. At this point, we're seeing the top sellers brushing up against $90,000 per month. That's just expletive nuts. No, it's really amazing, and there's many that are doing high thousands, tens of thousands, and many lives are being transformed because of this. We've seen people quit really cushy jobs with big studios to go work full-time on the asset store, and we see many others who are kind of waiting to make the jump the moment their revenue moves into a level where they can make a living from it. And what feels certain is that for those people who invest in it and actually spend resources on it, they can be successful. 10% of the sellers in the asset store are doing kind of significant revenues, $1,000 or more per month or more. And in any big group of kind of crowdsourced anything, you can just imagine that getting to the highest 10% is not actually that hard if you put your mind to it. So it's just, well, we love it anyway. We've, of course, been working on technology, always working on technology. And we released Unity 4 last November. Since then, we released a number of point updates. We're really proud of that. And there's some pretty cool stuff we've been working on of Unity 4.2, which is the newest iteration. And I'm going to ask my dear co-founder, Joachim Ante, our CTO, to come and show you just a few things.
Thank you, David. Thank you. So about a month ago, we released Unity 4.2, and I'm sure everyone has seen that already. So what I want to show you is a demo that our demo team has created. And it's a mobile demo. It's very focused on showing characters and skin shading on mobile. Has a lot of image effects and just a lot of advanced shader work built into it. So let's see it. All right. So we have characters with 40,000 vertices. There's subsurface scattering on the face, all running on an iPad 4 at 40 FPS. We have metallic car paint, very advanced shaders. There's a lot of image effects going on to give it good effects. You have this slow motion mode here where you can take a look at things very closely. You can see there's a lot of lens flares going on, and the faces are just amazing. I don't think I've ever seen something like this on a mobile device before. There's also a 4-kilometer viewing distance in the world, so there's a lot of objects happening, and it's all running at 40 FPS. So let's see it a bit longer. All right, yeah, and that's the demo. Thank you.
He'll be back. So there's a few things that we've been doing with the technology and with the engineering that I'm going to just say a few things about. So we've been going kind of crazy with our development process. What turned out to be the case as we grew to more and more engineers was that as we were supporting more and more platforms, we kind of needed to move into a more iterative mode. So we've been doing that. We've been working really hard on this. And in order to enable it, It's actually something that's not very widely known, but a third of our engineering resources are now in QA. So, there's a massive amount of automation of test suites. There's a huge amount of kind of automatic things that happen whenever somebody checks something in. In fact, we're building and running on, well, almost 20 platforms and sort of strange types of hardware, everything we do. And we're doing something really cool as well as of recently, and that is that we're taking kind of, a big piece of this test suite and we're sharing it with Google and, well, others yet to be named. Where basically Unity is now being used to test the platforms, both the operating system and the devices. And of course, this means in the future that devices will treat Unity games, your games, kind of better and better. We'll be talking more about this soon. We've already been blogging a little bit about it. And it's just a fantastic thing that the vendors of operating systems and devices are taking Unity so seriously that they want to ensure that the games really run well. And by doing this, we could go nuts on platforms. So, going into Unite a year ago, this was the lineup. We've been really proud of this. There's a lot of work. But with this new process and the fact that all these new devices, all the operating systems, and the new consoles absolutely feel that they want to have access to you guys. They want to make sure that you can work on their platforms. So we went and we partnered with Microsoft on the Windows Store and Windows Phone to make sure that would work really well. We went and actually we did Linux on our own. That was a love project. We're still calling it a preview, but I must admit that if it's an Ubuntu-like system, if the drivers are more or less sane, it actually works really, really well. It's probably the platform that has some of the lowest kind of problem rate, and that's even after some games in Humble Bundles and elsewhere have been really successful there. So we're proud of that. We partnered with BlackBerry to support their ecosystem. They're here, as well as, I think, well, some of the others. We went and worked with Nintendo on the Wii U, and thanks to Nintendo, the tools are actually free on the Wii U, which is, well, awesome and generous of them. We worked with Sony on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita. We're working with them on PlayStation Mobile, and also, although I don't have an icon for it because it doesn't actually have any embodiment yet, we're working with them on their future games cloud that they've gotten access to through acquiring Gaikai. Really cool stuff. We've gone and supported the Tizen operating system, which is, well, adopted or getting adopted heavily by Samsung and others. So that's exciting. And finally, we're working with Microsoft on the Xbox One. And what's really neat, apart from the fact, of course, that we support almost every platform you might conceivably want to target, what's really neat is that if you look at the lineup here, look back a few years, all these platforms now are more open than most platforms were just a few years ago. They're more accessible. It's easier to work with them. Of course, they have varying levels of openness, but they are really open. And all these guys are extremely hungry for games, and they believe that games from this community are one of the drivers of their ecosystems in the future. So for us and for you guys, it's extremely easy to work with them. In some cases, you can work through us. In other cases, you work directly with them. But it's just, there's so much energy there. Now, besides these established or big platforms, there's some kind of crazy things going on in the ecosystem around us. And I just want to mention a few. This is by no means exhaustive. But, the Sphero, it's a little robot that you control from your mobile phone. But because these guys are awesome and because, games are awesome, they've actually made a Unity SDK and turned it into kind of this augmented reality platform where you can control like zombies on your floor with your phone. Completely wacky. Unity supports this really well, and a lot of the games built for it, of course, are built by you guys. The Ouya micro console, recently out. Both the Ouya and the whole kind of micro console category have an interesting and exciting future ahead of it. And of course, the Ouya running Android means Unity just kind of works. A lot of the good games there are built with Unity. And it's kind of another strange path for games to go forward with that we haven't seen before. The Motive brain scanner, really designed for medical uses, also finds interesting uses in games and sort of other interactive experiences. They have a Unity SDK, and of course, a lot of the games are built with Unity. Really fascinating, strange thing. And then something that's close to my heart, the Oculus Rift, a virtual reality headset for the masses. These guys have incredible momentum. We support them really well. In fact, we partner with them, so whenever you get a dev kit, you get a long Unity trial and so on and so forth. And again, who knows what's going to happen in the future, but, well, I'm betting on this stuff, personally. And last, although it's not actually a hardware platform, Kickstarter is transforming a lot of things. So actually, the 4 different kind of hardware platforms I just showed, they all have been built off of really successful Kickstarters. But of course, Kickstarter is also, to a large degree, a game funding platform. And we see pretty much all genres, sizes of games, all platforms being funded through Kickstarter. We've been able to count at least 80 successfully funded Unity games. There's more coming in kind of every week. And by the way, like everything else about this community, we don't know half of it, so who knows what's actually out there. We're also proud that 2 of the most funded games projects ever, well, number 1 and 2, are using Unity, which is awesome. And we've been able to count $27 million of funding going directly into game projects that are built off of Unity. Something we're really proud of. So back to the old platforms that we supported for a really long time. We've had the Unity web player since 2005, actually. Like everything else in Unity, it kind of had a gestation period before it went anywhere. But it's currently doing scarily well. So at this point, we're seeing 6.5 or 6.5 installs every second. That's successful installs where the game actually launches and people play it. It's pretty nuts. So, go back to the beginning of this year, we had 165 million installs on computers around the world. And at this point, the pace is just growing and growing and growing. And we can say with a pretty high level of certainty that at least by the end of this year, we'll have at least 340 million installs. So if you can do a little bit of math, we're more than doubling the install base this year. It'll probably end up being even more. And it's just kind of a mad rush. And web games are still going strong. And it's just amazing to watch. We're doing some things to make this more successful, though, which has taken us a long time to get the momentum for. But we're doing a couple of really cool things this year. One is that earlier this year, we partnered with a company you may not know. It's called, the platform is called 360. It happens to be the most used web browser in China. And they have hundreds of millions of users. And what happens is, if you have this browser, you automatically get access to the plugin. So, if you encounter a Unity game you want to play, it just works. Really fantastic, and actually adds several hundred million more potential installs than what I just showed you. Another thing that we're just announcing actually today is that we're partnering with Facebook. We talked a little bit about it in the spring, but it's actually being released today. That we're doing a number of things with Facebook. One is that Facebook actually created a games category on their canvas for Unity games. So if you have a Unity game, gamers can find them. Also, in their app definition page where you kind of define your app, there's a box for your Unity file. And if you put that in there, Facebook will actually do a lot of clever things to kind of wrap it and help you make it a smooth experience in the canvas. We also built some really cool kind of framework around their social SDK. So basically for adding friends, sharing, buying credits, all these things, you can do those things inside Unity now in the canvas. So you don't have to pop into the browser, the jarring kind of shift. It works natively, really fast, and very elegantly. The SDK is beautifully done in a collaboration between our engineers and Facebook's. This will also shortly work on mobile. So from the same code base, you can work both on mobile and in the canvas. And lastly, in a few weeks, I'm told they'll also be bringing out an SDK for Unity for their parse services, which is sort of a host of game services for storing data, high scores, and things like that. So, just a fantastic partnership. They're also here, and we're really happy to be working with them. And then, of course, the last thing that's really big, and well, the biggest, is mobile games. So go back a year, that was iOS and Android for us. So now, of course, it's a lot more. So a complicated picture, lots of opportunities. Fortunately, it's all, you build it once and you export it very easily to all these different platforms. And mobile, as you might have been able to guess, is going scarily well. So at this point, through data we're collecting, we are seeing 100 installs of Unity-powered apps every second. Keep that in mind for a second. If you do the math, that's 10 million installs per day. And by the way, that's only the data we're given access to. This is opt-in, opt-out for you guys. So I know that a lot of people are not sharing the data with us. So we can project, and thinking about the space, we're pretty sure that the actual number is somewhere between 10 million and 20 million per day. So if you do the math, just annualize that to a year, we know that in the next 12 months, somewhere between 3.5 and 7 billion apps that are powered by Unity will be installed on mobile. And the last thing is speculative. This we feel extremely certain about. So guessing from various kind of data points, what's been shared by the platforms, we think that somewhere near 10% of all app installs on all mobile devices have Unity inside them. Yeah. And if you then consider the fact that games are driving between 70 and 90% of all monetization in the app stores, it actually means that probably a lot more of the actual revenue going through the app stores is driven by you guys. We wish we had the data, we don't, but we know it's a lot. And we just see these numbers ramping every week, and it just keeps going, and it's beautiful to watch. So that's kind of the Unity. Now, without bragging too much, I think I can say we got really good at building the engine. We've gotten good at working with you guys. You've gotten really good at using it. And that's great. And we've been doing this for over 10 years now. And we intend to keep doing it for, well, as long as we can foresee, basically. But we all know that in order to be a successful game developer today, besides the game engine, besides the skills, you also need some cloud services for kind of operating and monetizing your game. And I must admit that although we knew this, we kind of expected the community to take care of this, and that there would be other companies that would deliver these services, and there are, and some of them are pretty good. But a while ago, we did a survey of our users, and 22,000 of you actually responded, telling us kind of what you were happy with, what you were using, what you didn't like, what you intended to use, and so forth. And the results were pretty amazing, and actually very disheartening. It turned out that a big majority of you guys were not actually using any of these cloud services. And those who were using cloud services were not actually really happy with what you had. And when we asked at the end what you felt about us doing them, you actually said, overwhelmingly, the overwhelming majority of you said that, yes, you wish that we provided some of these services. So as always, we took that to heart, and we thought about it, then we thought some more, and then we started building a small but very brilliant team. That seems to be how we do everything at this company. It's based in Seattle, and I'm going to ask Todd Hooper to come up on stage and help me sort of announce what we call the Unity Cloud.
Thanks, David.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see everyone here today. I want to tell you a little bit about Unity Cloud. As David mentioned, we did a survey earlier this year, and over 22,000 of you gave us your input on the sort of services that you thought were very important to make a successful game. So we took all this data, we took it back to Seattle, and we looked at it. We drank a lot of coffee, we watched the clouds, and eventually we found it really came down to 3 things that you were telling us. To make a successful game, you wanted us to help you acquire players, to help you cross-promote your new games in your existing games, and ultimately to help you monetize your players. And that's exactly what we're announcing today with Unity Cloud's new ad service. It's a service for all Unity developers to cross-promote your games and to trade with other Unity developers to increase your player communities. And the goal of that is ultimately to make your games more successful and to leverage those billions of app installs that David spoke about. So how do you get started? It's very easy. You come to our new dashboard. Tell us a little bit about your game. tell us the name of the game, maybe a link to the iTunes Store or to Google Play. We'll be supporting iOS and Android. And then create some interesting ads for the game. These are full-screen interstitial ads for phone and tablet platforms, something that's going to catch a player's eye and entice them to click. So you've done that. In the past, integrating this into your game has been sort of a pain in the ass. And we really designed Unity Cloud to be very, very easy for you guys to get up and running. So it's very simple. It's one call to the interstitial somewhere in the game where in the future you think a player may be open to looking at a quick advert. And that might be at the end of a level. It might be at a menu. Once you've done that and your game is live, then come back to the dashboard, start a new campaign. Where do you want to show this ad? You may want to show this ad in one of your old games and promote your new game. You may want to show this ad in another Unity developer's game that you're trading installs with so you grow both of your player communities. The great news is both of those scenarios are completely free for Unity developers. Once you've told us that, start the campaign, the game's live, the player is playing the game, they see the ad pop up, and then they tap on that, they go to Google Play or to the iTunes Store, they install your new game. You just acquired a player. That's what it's all about. So we're very excited to announce that we're working with some of the largest publishers in the world, including Kabam, Glue, and Supercell, as well as many smaller Unity studios and indie developers that are participating in the beta of the ad service on Unity Cloud. Just these companies alone represent millions of dollars of advertising revenue that's going to be flowing into our developer community, which is something that makes everyone at Unity very happy. So please join us in the beta. Here's where you sign up for that. We look forward to your feedback, and we look forward to seeing you on Unity Cloud. Thank you.
It's early days, but I think this will be really awesome. Now, let's talk about the Union. It's been a while, right? We launched Union almost 3 years ago. We had the idea that there was a lot of fantastic games that you had built, and we saw by talking to a lot of partners that there was a lot of need or opportunity for these games on new platforms. You know, maybe we call them novelty platforms, early platforms, platforms that were not yet open, and we did that. We built a team, we built relationships. So we brought on a whole bunch of partners, and it's been going really well. We've, at this point, distributed almost 100 of your games to these platforms. We've distributed hundreds of thousands of dollars back to you. And the beautiful thing was that this took exactly no effort of yours. You would ship us your project files, and we would handle the rest, and you would get a check. It's been pretty awesome, and we've been kept pushing this. So since we've been going so global in the last year or two, we also have been building relationships in Asia. So we partnered with Baidu, which operates a massive Android marketplace in China. We partnered with China Mobile, which is the world's biggest carrier, and of course has a lot of apps and a lot of distribution of apps. And last, we've partnered with a 360, again, which also, besides the browser, happens to operate the biggest Android marketplace in China. So all these partners now are giving Unity apps extra support, they're giving it love, they're giving it promotion, and we're proud of this. But what we're most proud of in building Union is actually that we built a fantastic team. We learned a lot about marketing, promotion, relationships with platforms, and making sure that games are getting featured. We learned a lot about monetization. We built a crack team that focused on that. And also, we built incredible relationships to these guys, but also to many of you guys. And we feel we got really good at this. So in doing it, some of you, and eventually a lot of you, started asking us for more. Started asking us for more support, and even taking on some of the roles that normally a publisher would do. So we thought about that some more. There was some coffee involved, and some late nights, and some analysis. And we kind of came to the conclusion that we should. And so what we're doing is we're taking the Union group, we're laying that brand to rest. We never really loved that brand name. We're putting it to life as something new, namely Unity Games. And like so many other things, we're kind of going to go nuts. So I'm going to ask Oren Tversky on stage. He's been leading this team basically since the beginning, the Union team, now the Unity Games team, and he's going to tell us what he's going to do. Hey, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, how are you doing? Great to be here. So, as David mentioned, Union was about putting a lot of games on a lot of different platforms. But a lot of you came to us and said, can you really help us work more closely with us on a single game and really kind of make it shine? So with that, we've decided that Unity Games Publishing Program, our mission is to elevate the status and success of independent developers through using all the things that David talked about, our relationships with platforms, our relationships with you, the developers, and all of the technology and global scale that we have to bear. So that's a mouthful. What does that actually mean? Well, basically, it means a number of things. You guys are great at making games. We're looking to provide a bunch of complementary services and work in close partnership with you to do all the other stuff that can help make games successful. So let's take a look at a few of these. Financing. Always important to have money, especially if you're an indie. And we're going to be investing cash directly into the Unity developer community. Marketing and PR. We have people on the Unity Games team who have years of experience in games journalism, understand how to market and promote titles. Monetization consulting. We have a lot of experience with how to make your game financially successful. User acquisition, driving traffic to your game, getting players. And community management and end user support. And we're going to do all these things, and we're going to do them really well. And this isn't all the things we're going to do, by the way. But the truth of the matter is, any decent publisher will claim that they do all of these things. We think there's a few things that make us special because we're Unity. So first and foremost, we're going to offer developer-friendly terms. We want to work with you in partnership in ways that incentivize both you and us to make these games really, really take off. Next, because of the tools business, we have fabulous relationships with all the key platforms and partners on a global basis. This is getting your game featured is an area where we feel we have a good advantage. Technology. We are a tech company. We're going to help you with tools, with support, and that doesn't just mean making sure bugs get fixed. It also means making sure the gaming experience is really smooth and fantastic on low-end devices all the way up to the highest-end devices. Unity Cloud. You heard my colleagues talk about it. We are going to leverage this. And we are a global company. We have offices all over the world, and we have key distribution partnerships throughout the world. We're going to take Unity Games titles, your games, and localize them, culturalize them, and distribute them in their local markets in the way it's properly done in that market. So today, we're announcing that we have 6 games in production from all these studios up here. And I can honestly say that each one of these studios is bringing something unique and interesting to the gaming experience. A variety of genres, all sorts of different stuff. So we thought we'd give you just a little sneak preview of a couple of them. Archangel is a game from Black Tower Studios based in Japan and Australia. It is an action RPG set in a floating world, graphically rich and really clever gesture controls. Let's take a look. Next up, Free Ride Ski Cross from Roadhouse Interactive. They're actually a Vancouver studio. And I think you'll see the idea here is we're trying to show a little bit of variety here. It's a very different kind of game. A freemium, casual title, tap and hold mechanism. This really makes ski cross accessible to absolutely everybody. So I'm sure you have a lot of questions. There's a bunch of us. We're around the show. But also I encourage you to go check out our website. There'll be a lot more information in the coming weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So wonderful. Check it out. It'll be awesome. We're going to have a lot of fun, and we're really going to break our backs to make you guys successful. So with that, let's go back to the labs. So with Unity 4 out, Unity 4.1, 4.2, and a number of dot releases out, including done in parallel and all kinds of crazy development methodologies, I'm going to ask Joachim up on stage again, and we're going to show you a lot of tech.
Thank you, David. Thank you. All right, so Lucas and I will show you a little bit about Unity 4.3 and what we've been working on the last couple of months. But before I get into that, there's one other thing that I want to talk about. It's not part of Unity 4.3, but nevertheless very important. And that is GUI. So the GUI has a little bit of a history. We've been trying to ship it for many years now, and it's not shipped, and we're very sorry about that. But the truth is that whenever we got to actually having something that we felt was close to shipping, it didn't really feel like it lived up to our expectations. And so it's been reset many, many times over and over again. But the good news is, now we actually have a system that is working really well. It's very solid. And we are very confident that we will ship it very soon. And I promise it will be part of Unity 4.x. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess there's only waiting and seeing until that actually happens. But what I can do is I can show it to you in the editor. So it's very easy to use. This is a demo that was created by a guy who had never used it before. It's very easy to animate. So when we hover over these things, they animate. There's a little bit of UI here. All of these buttons, they are clickable and so on. We spent a lot of time really optimizing it. So there's extremely efficient batching that is going on. There's automatic texture atlasing. And it's just very efficient to render. We can just draw these UIs very quickly. It's also, the cool thing about this is that it gives you full access to shaders, so you can really make very custom and very advanced controls. It's fully 3D. You can see here, everything moves a little bit around when you move the cursor and so on. And again, very easy to animate. Yeah, and works really well. There's a talk about the GUI system, which Michael Leoshenko is giving, who's one of the developers, and it's later today. If you're interested in the GUI system, please go and visit that talk. I'll just very quickly show you a little bit of the GUI system. It's a system where you can basically select these objects, move them around, you can scale them, you can rotate things. Yeah, and you have buttons, you can change colors, you can define callbacks from the inspector, which things should get triggered. And yeah, it's basically very easy to use, very easy to animate, and lets designers really work with it. So that's the new GUI. If you're interested, go visit Michael's talk later today. And now I'm going to ask Lucas on stage, who will take a look at some of the other features that we have in Unity 4.3.
In the Unity engineering team, we've been thinking, what would Unity look like if it would be as friendly to people who make 2D content as it is to people who make 3D content? So we squint our eyes a little bit. We like to sit around and think. So, we squeeze our eyes a little bit. Maybe it could look like that. And then after, we tried different logos, we started to think about really what kind of problems are different for people who make 2D content than they are for people who make 3D content. If you want to bring assets into your game, that's kind of different if you make a 2D content. If you make a 3D game, you want to throw in FBX files and models, but if you want to make a 2D game, it's mostly images. And often the images, there's a big image that contains many elements. And when you want to construct your scene, you have a different problem. You don't want to have these 3D gizmos and 3D scene construction tools. If you're making a 2D game, you want to have 2D scene construction tools that make it easy to scale and rotate 2D things on a flat plane. And if you want these things in your scene to move around, maybe using physics, it would be really nice if there was a physics system that was built to deal with 2D things instead of trying to convince a 3D physics system that it should really be a 2D system and that you kind of have to push everything all the time so that it won't secretly fall over forward or backward. I'm pretty sure many of you have gone through that. Also, if you want to move these things around in your scene, not using physics, but by animating yourself, that's kind of different as well. If you want to make a 3D game, you animate things by moving things around in the scene and rotating them, maybe skeletons or just whole models together. But if you animate a 2D game, what you often want is you want to actually change the image a lot as well. And then lastly, when you get close to actually shipping your game and you want to get a lot of performance out of it, you're looking for different kinds of optimizations. The inclusion culling that we have for 3D games, it doesn't really help you much in 2D games. What you care about is that, the images that are on screen at the same time, it would be great if they come from the same atlas textures so that they can be all drawn in the same draw call. That's actually what you're looking for. So the good news is that this daydreaming session, that it didn't take place last week, but it took place last year. And for the past year, we've spent a lot of energy into making all these things. And all these 2D features that I just described that would be really nice if they would exist, they actually exist. And we will give them to you in your hands when we ship Unity 4.3. So of course, anyone could say that. So I actually brought in a secret build from the lab. It's an early internal build that we have of Unity 4.3, and I'm going to use it to show you some of these features. All right, here we go. So let me start actually by showing this project that I have right here that our fabulous Learn team has made to try out this new 2D stuff. I can hit play. Maybe we could get some sound on here. Let's have you. You know, it's I mean, it's a typical small, cute kind of 2D game. It has physics, collision, animation, everything you'd expect. Let's take a look at a bit of how this was made. The first thing I'd like to show is that the scene view now actually has this 2D button over here. You know, typically a Unity scene looks like this, and you kind of have to, pretend that it's not 3D. We didn't think that was very nice, so we added the 2D button, which will put your scene view into 2D mode and which will make it work really well if you want to make 2D content. Now, let's take a look at some of the import pipeline improvements that we did. For instance, if you take this texture over here, you'll see that it's one big image that contains all the different elements that the artist wanted to be animatable separately. You'll see here in the importer that you're able to tell Unity that this is a sprite and not a normal texture, which will give you this sprite editor button. So let's take a look at what that is. So we get a good view of it here. And you'll see that we have like auto-slicing functionality over here. I go to slice, I say slice, and you'll see that Unity automatically looked at all the pixels and it tried to guess for you, which part of this image you would like to use as a separate element. If we kind of messed up or if you wanted another one, you would just drag over here and you add another one. So let's hit apply and see what happens with that in the project folder. Notice that in the project folder here, we have this fold out, and you'll see that inside this asset, we actually now have roughly 10 sub-sprites. Sprite is a new thing in Unity 4.3. So that's a very easy way to get, it's a very different way to get 2D content into your game. So let's take a look at what happens if I actually want to use this. So I'll throw in this guy. Notice that I can just drag a sprite into the scene view. And here you immediately also see the different scene, the different scene construction tools that you have. There's no 3D gizmos here or handles or these 3D model rotating things. There's just these 4 things, and it kind of works like you would expect to. You can scale them like this. There's all sorts of constraints under the modifier keys. Oops, kind of made it a bit too big. You can rotate them like this. It all works like you would expect. So let me, let me add some eyes to that and try to parent that. Did I parent it to the right guy? Yes. Okay, so let's take a look at how I would work with this if I want to move this thing around. So let's start by trying to move it around with a new physics system. So I will go to Add Component here, and you'll notice that we have a new subsection over here, Physics 2D. It's a completely separate 2D physics system, but it has all the same type of components that you already know. It has a rigid body, it has a whole bunch of colliders, and it has some joints. So for this guy, I'm going to add a rigid body, and then I'm also going to add a polygon collider. And then just because falling needs to happen on something else, I'm going to take this guy and put it here. Maybe make it a bit bigger. Oh. And I'll rotate it a bit. And I'm going to add a polygon collider to this guy as well and see what happens. Oops. Does everyone know this trick? Control-Shift-F, frame selected, or I think it's called frame selected. I really like it like that. Here we go. And you'll see the guy actually falls off like that. So it's a new physics system. It's built, it's built completely to make 2D games nice, but it works exactly like the physics system that you already know. In fact, in some ways, it's actually a little bit nicer than the physics system you already know. There's this nice little feature on the polygon collider over here that if I check Edit Collider, you can actually see the polygon shape that we used by looking at all the pixels in your image. From that, we try to determine this collision shape. And you can see that our algorithm, it chose to be a bit generous on the amount of control points that we had. So I'm just going to, drag this detail slider down because I don't need that much detail on my collision shape until where I like it, pretty much like there. If you want to bulb rotate a bit and you don't like it, you can actually move these things around yourself, create a few new ones to get exactly the kind of collision shape that you want. All right, so that is a quick view of the new physics system. But of course, not all the time do you want to move things around with the physics system. There's also many times where you want to make an animation of your, where you just want to make an animation yourself and have it not be physical based. So I'm going to make a new scene, and I'm going to take a look at this swan sprite sheet over here. Take a look at it in the sprite editor, and you'll see that the Learn team already set up all the different sprite frames for this swan. Or maybe it's a duck, I guess, I don't know. Well, swan maybe. You'll see that the pivot point is correctly set up so that the animation will look nice. And we have this nice little feature. Oh, you'll see that they will also appear as subsprites. And there's this nice feature. If I take if I drag multiple sprites into the scene view at the same time, Unity will actually automatically offer to generate an animation for me. So let's take a look at that. And as I show, as I have the swan over here, oops, this is not a Mac. I'll open the animation window, and you can see that this is actually a new kind of animation window. We call it the dope sheet, because when we're trying to figure out what the kind of problems you have when you want to animate things in a 2D game, we discovered that if you want to change the image of a sprite, that is very hard to do if you have like this curve-based animation editor where, which was actually built to, move positions around. So this new animation window is actually called we call it the dope sheet internally. We'll have to see if that will also become the public name. You can open it up here, and you can actually see that it has different, you can actually see the different sprite frames that you want to animate here. So I can hit play, and it goes like that. It's funny actually how this animation window, it has a bit of a story to it, because we tried to make 2D games easy, and then we figured, yeah, I guess we kind of need a new animation window for that. I'm not sure we actually realized that when we started. So we made a new animation window, and then we realized, this animation window, it doesn't really work with our undo system. So we had to make a new undo system. I can imagine it's hard to get excited about that if you're not in the engineering team. The good news about the new undo system is that it's very high performance. I get no laughs on that. Who cares about a high performance undo system? Actually, you do. Because there's many things in Unity, especially if you get really big projects, that can start to feel slow sometimes, and often that is actually because of the undo system. If you have a huge project with a huge scene and you delete a game object, sometimes that can take a bit longer than you'd like. And the reason for that is actually that internally we modify all this undo state. So it's kind of a nice additional side benefit that because we had to rewrite the undo system, because we had to rewrite the animation system, because we wanted to make your life easier when you make 2D content, the performance that you get in big projects has also been improved. I'm mostly faking it with this animation window. The guys that really know about it, they actually made it, and they are in the same talk as the GUI talk. I think it's in this room right after lunch. So if you want to know more about the animation window, I suggest you go to that talk. And I will move on and talk about a few more things that we did to make 2D developers' lives easy, and those are related to optimization. So if we take a look at this one over here, I guess in most engines and how most people develop their game, you would actually expect this thing to be drawn using 2 triangles with a texture on it. But if I actually set the viewport here to textured wire, you'll see, I hope you can see it on the monitor like that, you see that we didn't choose to actually render it with 2 triangles, but we looked at the pixels and we tried to generate a mesh that that has a good balance of being complicated, but also having good coverage of where there's actual pixels that contribute to the final image. The benefit of this is that there's fewer pixels for the graphics card to draw. There's a bit more vertices, but there's less pixels, and in graphics cards today, that is a very healthy benefit. It's a healthy optimization, I mean. There's one more thing that we have, when it comes to optimization, which is automatic atlasing or sprite packing. So when you make a game or when you hit play, what we do is actually we try to, we take all the sprites that you have and we want to pack them into texture atlases. And this is nice because when two different sprites that live in the same atlas are in the scene at the same time, we can actually render them with a single draw call. So this all happens automatically. It's just an optimization that we put in, but you have some control over it because obviously you know a lot better which kind of sprites are likely to appear on screen at the same time. So in the texture importer, over here, you can actually specify an atlas name which you can use to tell the Unity atlasing algorithm to say, okay, put these things in the atlas with this name, or make sure they're together because I'm pretty sure that all these assets for my dungeon level are very likely to be rendered on the screen at the same time. Okay, so we can import 2D things, we can build scenes with 2D things, we can move them around with physics, we can move them around with a new animation window, and at runtime, we can actually render them really fast. This is a pretty complete overview of all the 2D features that we added. Oh, I'm sorry, except one. I think that's so cool. Let me show that. You'll see the new sprite renderer component. It actually has a color property. So I can take the sprite and maybe make it red. Whereas before in Unity, if you wanted to have 10 different things with 10 different colors, you would have to make 10 different materials. But for the sprites, we actually made the color of the material overridable on the actual sprite renderer, on the instance. So you don't have to make all these different materials. And of course, the good news is that we feed this color to the 3D card using vertex colors, which means that even if you have different instances that have different tinting colors, they can still be batched into the same draw call. Okay, so that that pretty much covers the 2D features. It will be in Unity 4.3. It will be part of the same product. The logo change, that was a bit of a joke. It's the same product, it's the same name, it's the same license, and it's going to be available to free and pro users. And if you're already a Unity 4.x licensee, it's going to be available for no extra charge, just like all the features in 4.1 and 4.2 and 4.3 will be. So before, 2D is not the only thing we've been working on. And before I will give the stage back to Joachim to talk about some of the animation improvements that we've made and optimizations that we've made. I want to quickly show this thing over here, which is a new mono develop. It has auto-completion and all that things on the new rigid body 2D class. The mono-develop guys at Xamarin actually did a very good job at making mono-develop much easier to love. The reports we're getting so far is that the experience is much better. You'll want to hug it a lot more and curse it a lot less. And it's going to be part of Unity 4.3 as well. Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask Joachim to come back on stage. And we're going to go through some of the animation improvements that we've done in 4.3 and some of the performance improvements that we've done.
Thank you, Lucas. So with Unity 4.0, we shipped our new animation system called Mechanim. And it had some really breakthrough new features. We introduced retargeting of humanoid characters. We have amazingly well-integrated previewing of all the animations. We have this full state machine and controller paradigm built into Engine. But, of course, no system that you ship in the first version is always perfect from the start. So with 4.3, we spent a lot of time going through the animation system and making it even better. And I think we addressed pretty much all of the big problems that came up in the feedback in the meantime. So the first feature I want to show you is blend shapes. with blend shapes, you can animate facial animations really well. It's basically, you can define vertices where they should be, and then Unity will morph between these vertices. You can import them with an FBX file that you can create in your favorite modeling tool, and you can animate them in the FBX file, but you can also animate them inside Unity. So the guys from Mixamo, they made a little demo that shows really well how expressive you can make characters with this new blend shape feature. So I'm just going to play this. All right. So, like I said, in Unity, you can create the blend shape animations. Basically, when you make a blend shape, you have control over each of these blend shapes. This character, for example, is made of around 50 different blend shapes. And they can all be controlled from a curve separately. So also we made it so that it's very extendable. You all know the things you can do in the asset store, and the same with this new animation system and the blend shapes. The Mixamo guys actually made a tool with which you can record facial animation directly from a webcam. So I'm going to show that really quickly. Okay. So when I look into this camera here, you can see it's actually recording my face live. Okay. So now I can go into the animation in the animation window, and I can play this back. So this is also the new dope sheet that Lucas showed earlier. So we can go in here, and we can switch to the curve mode. So I can select something over here, go to this keyframe here. We can scrub, of course, and I can just adjust the curve a little bit. So here, just close the eye, open the eye, and these kind of things. Yeah, so that's basically the new tools that you have in the dope sheet, and it's really, it is a huge step for the animation window, and you can animate sprites, but you can also animate curves really well, and so forth. But we didn't stop there. There's a lot of other things we addressed. Another thing is we added support for a function called go-to-state. So commonly, when you do animation, it's really nice that you have this state machine, and you can make really nice transitions, and your animators have a lot of control. But sometimes in a game, you just want to have full control from script and just jump to a specific location in your animation. And that is what go-to-state is for. You can basically define a name of a state and the time where it should jump to, and then it will just do that. So with that, you have full control over it. Another commonly requested feature is animation events. With animation events, you can call arbitrary script functions from inside the animation playback, and when the time is crossed, the animation event will be fired, and you can do anything you like from a script. So this makes it very easy for your artists to time game events with the animation system. And this is now supported in Mechanim just as well as it was in the old system. But not only that, there was a very big workflow issue with the animation events in the past, which we fixed, which is what if you want to have an FBX file and you want to put an animation event onto one of the clips in this animation clip that comes from the FBX file. So in the new tools, you can simply add the animation event directly in the model importer, and you don't have to duplicate the clip or anything like that. So it's much easier to work with in the common workflows. Thank you. There's a lot of other things we did, and I have another demo for this. So with Mechanim, you have a lot of power, and it was pretty fast when we shipped it. But we took a step back, and we tried to make it even faster, even more memory efficient. So we looked a lot at data that comes in from complex FBX files and complex animations and so on. And the first thing we did is we did around a 10x memory optimization on complex animation controllers. I think that's pretty amazing, and I think it will make a huge difference. Then we looked at how can we make the whole animation pipeline faster? So how can we make skinning faster? How can we make instantiate time of a character faster? How can we make playback of animation clips faster? So this is how a normal animation looks in Unity 4.2, right? So you have your character. If you look at it in the hierarchy window, you have this very deep hierarchy of objects. And that's great and all. It's very nice to work with when you just want to have full control, and you might want to, from a script, move some of these transforms around. But the problem is that in practice, most of the time, you're not really interested in all these transforms. And it has a certain amount of memory and also performance overhead to have all these objects. So what we did in Unity 4.3 is we added this button, Optimize Game Object, and you click on Apply. And what happens is now we have a character, the same character, which will play back in the exact same way with just 2 game objects instead of 70. And when I play it back, it's exactly the same. So sometimes you also want to put mount points on your character. So for example, I might want to add something to the hand. In that case, you can go here and you select the spine. You go into the spine, the clavicle, the shoulder, elbow, wrist, pinky. All right. And now we click Apply again. And now this transform shows up here. We can look at it over here. And when we play, we can see that this animation, while it shows up in the root in the hierarchy, which means it's much easier to attach things to it because you don't have to find all these objects in your hierarchy. You just expose the things that are actually relevant for your gameplay code, and then you can attach things to that game object. So this has a lot of benefits. It's good for workflow, but it's incredibly good for performance. So we did a lot of work on multi-threading things. We did some optimizations on animation clip playback. We found out that most of the animations that you guys use have a lot of constant curves. So a lot of the FBX files contain scale keys that are always the same, usually 1, 1, 1. Great, but not very useful when you care about having a lot of characters on screen. So you can't just take these scale curves away because they often have meaning. But instead, we have an automatic process where we classify curves there's no work for you at all. But if all the curves in your whole character and all your clips use the same scale curves, then we will simply reduce them and there's no performance cost for it. So with that, I put together a little demo where we have some characters running around. This is using the nav mesh system. There is 2,000 characters on screen. There's shadows, there's nav mesh, there's unique animation, there's no fakery going on. These are actually all unique characters that are sampling at a different time. They all start at a different sync position. And it runs easily at 60 FPS. So I think that's pretty amazing. All right, so that's the animation update we have. And now I'm going to give it back to Lucas to give some other updates on 4.3. Thank you. Click goes over there.
Wow, nice. So 2D is the big showcase feature of Unity 4.3. But as you've seen, we've spent a lot of time optimizing everything related to animation. Not only the sampling, but the whole way we generate these hierarchies. Basically all, everything that needs to be fast if you want to have an amazing amount of characters on screen. But we did a few more things, and I'm going to take you through the last few more things that we actually did in Unity 4.3. The first one is occlusion culling. We rewrote a large part of the occlusion culling system, and the biggest benefit that it has is that it's a lot faster now. It's a lot faster to bake your occlusion data. And the other thing we did is we made it a lot smarter when it comes to shadows. So before this keynote, I've tried to have the graphics guys explain to me exactly how this works with directional lights casting shadows, and then they both have a Z buffer, and they kind of combine it, and they try to prove that there's no way that the user can possibly show this shadow. To be honest, I don't completely understand how it works, but there's many more cases in Unity 4.3 where Unity can upfront guarantee that there's no way that you can see a shadow here, so we will just not render it at all. That's when, for instance, if there's a big house before the shadow, so I can see it. But it's also in cases where, for instance, there's a huge light, but it's completely enclosed, maybe in a building. Using the occlusion culling system, we can actually prove really fast that there's no way we're going to see a shadow from that light in the building, so we're not going to bother drawing it either. The other one, I guess I already quickly showed in the 2D demonstration, is a new mono develop. And another one is shader combinations. So if you want to get the most performance out of your game, or if you want to get a really unique look for your game, there's no escaping to having to know something about shaders. You don't have to write them all from scratch. Usually what people do is they take one of our shaders and they sort of kind of try to understand what it does, and they remove the features of the shaders that they don't need, or maybe they change it a little bit. And what you often have is that you need a few different shaders to do almost the same thing, except this one little thing. And you end up with like a whole bunch of different shaders that almost are identical except a small thing. So what we did in Unity 4.3, we made it possible for some of these small things to, in the shader, mark something as configurable. And then that actually shows up in the material inspector. So on a material, you can say, I want this shader, and I want to configure it like this. And then we take care of all the different permutations that could lead to, instead of you having to do all that management in your project folder. I guess there's one guy with some battle scars down there in the audience. We did a lot more stuff, but unfortunately the time slot that we have for the keynote is kind of limited. But I couldn't help myself, and I just tried to squeeze them in anyway. I'm not going to go through all of them. I talked to David on how I should present this, and he just said, yeah, just put it up and let it sink in for a while. So we have these, and then I couldn't help myself and made another slide. And then I couldn't help myself and I made another slide. And there's more, but they told me to stop here. So that's all great. All, an amazing amount of new functionality and new features in Unity 4.3 to help you make your games. Probably the 2D games that you'll make with these new features will look exactly the same like the 2D games that you are making today. It's just that, your life will be a lot more pleasurable while you do it. One more thing, while features are all nice and all, when we all go home and we're back programming in our office, features are nice, but of course there's also bugs or bugs. People keep telling me I say that wrong. Bugs. I would be lying if we said that Unity would be a bug-free product. If you add features at the pace that we do, it's inevitable that we make mistakes here and there. But we take the quality of a product very seriously, and we put a lot of energy into fixing bugs. We looked through our bug database, and it turns out that so far in 2013, we fixed 2,000 of them. Of course, most of the bugs that we work on, when we are making a new undo system or a new animation system, and you run into a bug there, of course you fix it there. So most of the bugs, you would see fixed in areas that undergo very active work. But that's not true for all of them, because while often it may seem, especially on these big feature presentations, that we only care about features, that's not true. Like, an amazing amount of energy of the development team actually goes into these tiny things that that are not worth even putting on these the cramped slides of the feature list, but in all combined in your day-to-day work make a big difference. So of these 2,000 bugs, 500 of them actually were for features released in way older versions of Unity. So not only do we try to up the quality of, whenever we take a subsystem and make it better, we continuously go over all the areas of the product, also, the less sexy ones, and we try to make it, a little bit better every day. Of course, there's always going to be features that we haven't gotten to yet, and we always try to get to them as soon as we can, but we spend an enormous amount of energy on just fixing bugs, because we realize that features are nice, but if you're working on your project and you hit a bug, it's just super annoying. So one more thing actually I want to say about the bugs is that I know many of the people here in the audience today have been so friendly and so kind to, when they run into a problem with Unity, to actually tell us about it. I know, if you have a problem with it, so it's very hard to sort of make the time for that. I just want to let everyone know that we really appreciate this, and it also really helps. We might not get to your bug report tomorrow or the day after, and if you file the bug tomorrow, the bug fix for it might not be in 4.3, but we go through all these submissions, we check all of them, and the bug reports that we get, they are a really useful resource for us to actually make the product better. So if there's something about Unity that annoys you, please tell us about it, and then at least we can try to fix it. All right, so that wraps up a feature demonstration of Unity 4.3. I'm not going to burn my hands and promise exactly when you'll have it, but we're way past our internal feature freeze. Obviously, as you've seen, we've touched many areas of the product, so maybe our beta period is going to be a bit longer than we're used to. After this conference, we'll go home and we'll work as hard as we can to make sure that these features will land in your hands as soon as we can. Thank you very much. I'm going to give it back to David.
It's humbling to be surrounded by these guys every day. They are very smart and they work so hard. So that was 4.3. So we're close to wrapping up this part of the keynote. I just kind of want to meditate back, because the thing is that we've always been a company that was driven by a philosophy of how we saw the world and what we wanted to do. And we remind ourselves quite often about this, and I just kind of want to, tell you how we see it. Very quickly, we're an advanced technology company. We believe that what we're best at is building awesome technology. And even in the basement days when we were just, 3 founders. Oh, by the way, you may have heard one of us actually left, but he left to make games, and he's sitting right here somewhere, with Unity, of course. So he's still part of the family. But back to when we were founders, 3 founders in the basement, we had this idea that we wanted to take all the advanced technology that goes into game productions and wrap it up in this tight-knit, efficient, elegant, easy-to-use bundle that we would also make very affordable. But that was sort of not where our thinking stopped, and we believed that the responsibility was not just to create this bundle, but think of it as a tool for everyone to create things with, as a platform for kind of creation. And because we were philosophically driven, we always believed, and we still do, that the end goal of that is not just to make things possible, although that's fantastic, but actually to democratize the game industry and make it possible for more people than before to make better games and have more fun doing it and be more successful. And I hope you see all the things we're doing like we do as kind of targeting that and pointing at that. And it's something we break our backs over every day, and I really, believe that's important. So this is as far as we thought, but I met with a pretty amazing guy called Ray Muzica, who was one of the founders of BioWare, and I was kind of telling him the story, and he pointed out to me something that was pretty touching to me, that kind of all these things we built, plus the community around it, kind of creates a social movement that it's not just about creating things, it's not just about being successful, but it's also about helping others and sharing and giving back. And we see that every day, whether it's in the forums, in the bug reports, in the asset store, or just in the way people collaborate. And that's, of course, why we run the Unite conferences. We're doing them all over the world this year. And that's why we keep spending so much energy on this. We just never saw that might happen, but it has, and it's humbling and fantastic. So with that, I want to invite one of those members of this amazing community up on stage. He also happens to be, well, one of the founding fathers of the game industry, I think I can say. A legendary game developer, Richard Garriott, who has also been to space. I don't know, it's just awesome. Thanks for coming, man.
Of course, a real pleasure. Thank you all very much. It's really exciting for me to be here because I know all of us who are using Unity are kind of by definition fans of Unity, but I would like to claim that I know I'm one of the top fanboys of Unity ever since we started using it. Every day that we use it, I'm reminded again as to how important I think Unity is for the games industry and for all of us as developers. And yesterday during the rehearsal for this event, I got to see some of the things that you've just been shown now, and I immediately got on the horn and was emailing my team back in Austin saying, you all better be watching here today. So here's a shout out to the team back in Austin. I hope you've been watching and taking good notes so we can start putting some of this great new technology into deployment of the game we're working on right away. Anyway, I think it's hard to overstate what I think the importance of Unity is, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of my 40 years now in the games industry and why I think now is such an exciting time and why Unity is so important. I'm probably best known for creating role-playing games, fantasy role-playing games, the Ultima series, maybe a few of you have heard about down through the years. And like I mentioned, I've been doing this about almost 40 years, and I've formed now my third company. Portalarium is our third company after building and selling my first 2. And if you go back to what I'll call before the creation of Unity, making games started out hard, and in many ways has gotten harder and harder and harder and harder up until the creation of Unity. And because of that, I really do think that not just the creation of, but the very broad adoption of, and this community around Unity is really a watershed event in the history of gaming. But let me take you way back to begin with. When I started in 1974, it really was hard. Not only do you have to hand code everything, but any data that you wanted to put into a game had to be hand entered. There were no art tools. There wasn't even really art. But anything you wanted in was you literally manually put in. Even when the Apple II came out and I was doing my first 3D games, there were no 3D tools. I actually went to my mother, who was an artist, and I had her show me how to draw perspective. I went to my dad, who knew a little bit of trigonometry better than I did in high school. We worked out the math, and I hand-coded these algorithms in BASIC to draw line segments to do screen updates about 1 every 5 seconds. But it is actually mathematically correct 3D, even back in 1980. With Ultima 1, when I introduced tile graphics, tile graphics was something that, again, there were no art editors. I had to first draw art on a sheet of graph paper. I used that to then convert those hypothetical pixels into binary, including reversing bit order and keeping color bits out separately. I took that binary, had to convert it into hex. I had to poke that hex manually into memory. I then would write code to copy blocks, 32-byte blocks of memory into the nonlinear screen area of RAM. And then when I did that, you would look at the screen to see if it looked anything like what you thought you drew on graph paper, which it often didn't. And you had to decide where along those many manual steps you had made a mistake. Very painful. And you might think that over the years, as machines have gotten faster and faster, that this has gotten easier. But there's something I like to point out about machine speeds and their capabilities down through these eras. And if you go back to that Apple II, it was a 1 megahertz machine. The whole machine held 64K of RAM at most. And 1 picture took up 8K, so about 8 pictures would fill all the RAM in the computer. And in fact, the 5.25-inch hard drives would only hold a dozen or so pictures before you filled the whole floppy disk. And so you can just imagine there's a frame rate. If you're moving a certain amount of memory at 1 megahertz into those kind of memory areas, it has a hypothetical frame rate. Well, if you jump forward 5 or 10 years to the early PCs, well, the machines went up to 10 megahertz. But a picture is about 10 times as big, and the total memory was only about 10 times bigger, and the 3.5-inch disks only held about 10 times as much. So again, if you're animating stuff to the screen or moving it on and off disks, you really, the image quality has gone up, but the work we had to do as developers was sort of the same in a sense. Even if you went up to the 100 megahertz area, you can see that the numbers sort of all scale similarly down through decades of computer development, all the way up until finally we got to hardware rendering. And hardware rendering is the time where finally we kind of broke out of what felt to me like this treadmill of increasing pixel and color depth, but we weren't really making it easier for us to do that much more with, especially the animation aspects of the games. But this invoked a new problem. Because once we had hardware rendering, it meant that we freed up a lot of those other assets or the other capabilities of the machine, which immediately we as developers dove right into and started creating assets to fill. And so the content we began to create on the back sides of our engines, so it ballooned enormously. And so not only were many of us who were writing engines from scratch spending a year or 2 or 3 building an engine, but then we spend another year or 2 or 3 building the content to play through that engine. And the problem with that is, and this happened a lot, especially in the MMO era, which was also trying to solve a lot of networking issues as well on top of all that. And a lot of the recent MMOs, as a case study, have now taken not just tens of millions of dollars to develop, but some have broken the hundreds of millions of dollars to develop. The minimum, was about 3 years to develop. Some of those have stretched on to 5 to 7 and pushing maybe 10 years to develop. And so when you think of that amount of millions of dollars, many, many years, if not a decade, and team sizes of hundreds, not only is that frankly horrific to sign up for to go do, but it also is incredibly risky because of the rapid pace of iteration now we're seeing. Not only do a lot of us not have very many of those in our career that we can take the time to do, but the risk factor of having a tragic loss of a huge amount of money and time wasted has gone way up as well. And to me, that is the incredibly important problem that Unity so elegantly fixes. As you all are well aware, and we saw a lot of the demonstration data about today, the fact that Unity has taken on not just the render pipeline, but so many other aspects of game development to keep them under constant improvement to make sure that all of us have access to well-documented, extremely object-oriented, extremely good user interface, consistent capabilities right at the threshold where all of us can now make AAA games without having to worry about for the first many years of development, the first many millions of dollars of development have gone away for, you know, while I know a lot of us are on tight budgets, but compared to building it yourself, the price they charge, I think, is obviously well worth it as long as we can find a way to manage it. And they're doing, I think, a fantastic job of giving us ways to have access to the technology to manage within a variety of budgets. But just as important as what's happening within their offices is what's happening around the community. You know, the fact that, you know, at least for us even, we get a huge amount of forward progress, of help, not directly from Unity, but from the community at large. And we also feel very strongly about giving back into that community, which I'll come back to a little later. But what that lets us do is it lets us focus our company, and every employee and every dollar we spend is only on the unique content that makes our game what we believe hopefully will be great. And so, for example, at my new company, Portalarium, it's taken our tech team down to, you know, considerably less than half of what I've had in previous companies because of our ability to focus only on content and the kinds of content, the changes we need to make our game unique. The Unity store has allowed us to not only do rapid prototyping, but we're actually buying tons of final assets to put in our game directly. And in fact, you know, we built a Kickstarter. We funded our game through Kickstarter. We built the prototype in only about 45 days. It's only been about 90 days since the end of Kickstarter that I'll show you some images of. And in 90 days, we already have something that looks like a fairly complete, even though it's not, you know, MMO-like game. You know, and I think that we'll be able to build an Ultima scale product in only about 18 months. When if we were to do it anything like the old ways, it for sure would be at least 3 years, maybe 5 years, that we're condensing to a much tighter time frame. And I really, again, think we could only do that because of the existence of Unity. So let me take you through a little bit of, you know, kind of where I think we're at compared to the old days. You know, for the 80s and 90s, you know, the solo player Ultima series, I think, made a good marker of at least where the role-playing games genre had developed from, you know, tile graphics up through the beginnings of 3D. You know, I was fortunate enough to get some credit along with the rest of our team back in Austin for bringing out Ultima Online and opening a new era of massively multiplayer games that for about 10 years, MMOs have been one of the primary breadwinners for the industry. And during those 30 years, there are some things that I've learned that I think are universally good game design ideas, or things that make products successful without regard to how we build them with tools and technology. And one of those are things that, especially in role-playing games, you know, trying to make our games socially relevant. In other words, there's all kinds of stories. There's an infinite variety of stories we could tell, but I've found that I've had my biggest successes when I make sure that the story that I'm telling within my games is one that is personally relevant to you as a player, which usually means that it's relevant to society at large with an adjustment to what's happening in the world today. So, you know, watching the news and seeing how society is changing is, I find, a rich place, a rich mining field, gold mine to find for stories. Pardon this slide, I know is basically impossible to read, but another thing I've discovered that I've seen has been the death of so many competitors' games, or even has hurt some of my games if I've deviated from this, was making sure that terminology that we use in games is all understandable and pronounceable and readable and repeatable. I can't tell you how many games I've seen where people have, you know, made Klingon languages and things which you can neither read nor pronounce very easily, that a few hardcore ultra nerds kind of get really into, but the majority of people just, you know, goes over their head and their eyes glaze over, so they kind of miss out. I found that the truthiness, to use a Stephen Colbert word, you know, the truthiness of the reality that you create, I think, is really important. Where, you know, if you asked what the truth of the reality we live in today was, it would be very hard to describe in any kind of totality, and especially if you get into philosophical or religious aspects. Of course, we're all going to disagree. But what I've found is that if you simplify the truth of your universe into something that is a nice little neat package and has a simple numerology associated with it, maybe even some visual graphical symbols that can kind of reinforce that, you can make something that not only is simple and elegant, but in many ways it'll feel more true than the reality in which we live, which is an unusual side effect if you're trying to make games that people can you know, want to suspend their disbelief and live within. And similarly, cultural evidence. You know, this is something that I'm a big Tolkien believer in this sense, to make sure that, you know, we as creators, as opposed to just making an arbitrary environment, you have to make sure that your environment, when you look around in it and study the details, that you don't see things that break that third wall. You really have to be complete in your envisionment of the products that you're developing. And the last little piece of sort of this 40 years of accumulated knowledge is one that I refer to as iconic imagery. I mean, if I asked you to draw a 1950s rocket, everybody would draw pretty much the same thing. If I said a classic flying saucer UFO, we'd pretty much all draw the same thing. And all of us could draw a TIE fighter or a Death Star or a Millennium Falcon with some level of accuracy. And so I think you know, George Lucas did a brilliant job of visual iconography. But I can't tell you how many games fail at making a visual language for the objects and features and landscapes within their world that fail at making them something that you can remember and that you can even sketch out in your mind, or maybe even if you're not an artist, even on a piece of graph paper. And so the bottom right image is actually a Drouthy from Wing Commander. It's actually one of Chris Roberts, when he was doing the Wing Commanders, it was my favorite chip out of his, because again, it was simple enough shape that I could draw it in my head and repeat it on paper without much help. So that brings us up to what I'm doing now. And so, at least for me, as one of the community of Unity developers, we're now developing a game called Shroud of the Avatar. To me, it's sort of the spiritual successor to all the work I've done previously in medieval fantasy role-playing games. It is a new type of multiplayer game. It's not exactly an MMO, but it has a lot of similar features. We're playing with the term selective multiplayer. And what I mean by selective multiplayer is that while it looks and feels a lot like an MMO in the sense of you can play with all your friends and strangers around the world who log into it at the same time, we'll find each other in this world. But unlike a traditional MMO where you have equal probability of running into anyone and everyone within the universe, which means most of the people you see are strangers, we're leveraging the friends graph that we will import or build over time during your gameplay to find ways to push people together who already have some sort of history. And it's interesting, if you look at, you know, solo player games sold to ones of millions of people. When we shipped Ultima Online sold to 10 times more people than any other Ultima before it, even though it was more expensive and more complicated, purely because, it was kind of therefore, because of the fact that you can play with other real people and how much more compelling it is to play with other real people, even though most of the people you run into are strangers kind of by statistical definition. But a lot of social media games these days are now selling into the hundreds of millions. And one of the primary reasons for that, other than there's many reasons, including, you know, ease of access and cost and other things, but one of those reasons is that it is much more compelling to join with or meet up with or be able to help work with people you already know in the real world, people you go to dinner with, the movies with, that you already have a social tie to. And so we're taking a new spin on MMOs to try to reinforce that. And one of the ways we're doing it is, if you've played other MMOs, you may recognize that one of the first decisions you often have to make is which shard, another term that came from Ultima history, which shard you have to live in. You live on the East Coast or in Japan or England, and so you log into a local copy of the world, which means if your friends have built their character on another shard, you'll never see them, or at least you know, not easily for sure. And we decided to correct that. Instead of breaking the world up in that way, we're putting everybody together in one giant world. That, of course, you might think would make the world too big or too overpopulated, which it nominally would. So instead what we do is, as you travel around the world, we break up the world into a stack of local maps. And if we need areas to be multiply instanced, which we hope we're successful enough to have as a common problem, how we stack people into those instances is based on that friends graph. And so we constantly are resorting people in the world to respect and reinforce the friends graph of players. And so if in the future, if anybody's interested, I can talk about more about how the detail of what we think how we're going to make that work. But to show you how powerful Unity has proven to be for us, you know, we in March through April ran a Kickstarter where we raised $2.3 million to get this game started. And that means we're kind of live with the player base from day one. So we're now very actively blogging and participating with the community to make sure we're developing the game they want, since they're the ones fundamentally playing for it, not only now, but in the long run. In addition to that, we've gone to do crowdsourcing of all the content we can because it saves us time and money and management bandwidth to do that. And what's really amazing about that is that in addition to the asset store that Unity has up, where we've been, not only built the art for our prototype, got the art for our Kickstarter prototype, we've found that we can get an enormous volume of AAA finished art right out of that asset store. And even when we find things in the asset store that aren't quite what we need, like we might import a dungeon set where the person made this beautiful set, but they have all the right turns that we needed, but for some reason they missed a left turn, or a deer that they rendered for being seen at a certain distance, and we really want it to be a little bit higher polygon count or a little higher res because we want to show it up a little bit closer. We'll make those modifications to that art that we got for more than fair price on the asset store. And now what we're doing is when we make those modifications or corrections or additions, we're just giving it right back to the original developer because we think we got a good deal out of it, and we're trying to make sure we give right back into the community that same way. Thank you. And people have asked, like, am I worried about using things off the asset store that somebody else might also show up in somebody else's game? And I'm going, look, if we're talking about rocks and trees and deer, I'm definitely not worried about those all looking similar. The things that we're doing internally uniquely with our own internal artists are, all the points of interest around our landscapes and, character models and all the things we're building internally. But even those we're now also going to, with some delay, be putting up on the asset store for all of us within the community as well. So here's where we are after literally since the end of Kickstarter. We threw away largely that little prototype we put together to raise money, started over again from scratch to build the real game. It's really been now 120 days since approximately since the end of Kickstarter, but the screenshots I'm showing you are from a demo we put together 30 days ago. So 90 days after we started from nothing, we've already got a game that I can log on to now anywhere in the world and play, and it's shaping up very quickly to feel like a game that this state would have taken us literally years to reach. We already have, as you can see here in this screenshot, the outdoors, the inventory control, the paper doll for your character, resources you can gather out of the field, chop down trees, get lumber and stuff. We've got our indoor spaces working really well. We've built an entire conversation system that, if any of you have seen them in blogs about Shroud of the Avatar, I'm kind of tired of the menu-based conversations and then quest log and then follow the arrow on the map till you farm for your level 1 monsters and rinse, repeat. And so we've created a conversation system for the NPCs where you just walk up and chat with them just like you would any other real person. You literally just stand in front of them and say, hello, bartender, my name's Richard, and what kind of beer do you have on tap? And the bartender will parse out of that entire thing that I just said. It'll say, yeah, hi Richard, and then and after that he'll remember my name since I introduced myself correctly, and he'll give me the list of all the things he has on tap for me to then order a drink from, again, typing in real English. And so that's a particular feature of the game that I'm personally particularly excited about. We've already put in all the crafting loops. If any of you are familiar with Ultimas, and especially Ultima Online, you know how big I am about these sandbox realities. I want to create everything in the world is interactive and usable. And we already have, not all the crafting is in, but key examples that we're now just having to repeat that pattern to fill out the rest of the game. We've got all the housing in the game. It's not finished, but at least in prototype form, you can get a house, place it down, move all the furniture around, decorate, all that sort of things that you need. I was just amazed how fast that all came online, not only because of my great team back home, guys, but also, again, the wonderful tools we're getting here from Unity. And one of the things I really find most interesting about having such a wonderful community that we are all part of and that we are all contributing back into is when things happen when we put the cloaks on our avatars. And so one of the features that we threw in 60 days into this project or so was we bought from one of the other community members this cloak solution that they had to add cloth physics into our character. And of course, since somebody else had done the work, we just really dragged it over, dropped it in, and because of the brilliance of how Unity is architected, it was almost literally that easy, drag it in and drop it. Sorry, artists, if I've undersold the difficulty you went through. But the result of that was, from our public standpoint, is that, don't forget, the people who play your game versus my game versus somebody else's game are not generally the exact same people. And so when our community saw that in, we got raves of success and compliments about, wow, how did you guys pull that off? You know, you guys are really amazing, and all this kind of stuff. And of course, we had to just kind of smile to ourselves because we knew we really, you know, borrowed the work from somebody else in the community. But the point is, we all will get independent credit for all these things that we're doing for each other. And that, I think, is one of the real magics to what it is we're doing, is that, you know, the rising tide lifts all ships. We are all going to do better because of the shared community we're in. The same thing was true, you know, in the modular dungeons. That was some place where we actually put a fair bit of work into ourselves because we didn't find quite the modular sets we needed to in the asset store. Object physics and lighting and that sort of thing. And I was really excited to hear about some of the new technology that is coming online. But, so that's a little bit of what we're doing, kind of where I've been. Obviously, it has been with a lot of help from Unity. Obviously, you know, we're still growing our team, our company, and our product. We're hopefully going to be able to put out something before the end of the year that players can get in and make some comments on, ship the final product maybe a year after that. But the last thing I'd really like to say about Unity is, I said, you know, it really is a watershed event. It is obviously an incredible set of tools and an incredibly talented team that's put this all together for us. You know, Unity's existence is not going to cause all of us in this room to become successful. But what it is going to do, Unity is going to allow many more of us in this room to be successful than will be true for those people who are not in this room and are not using Unity. So for that, I'd like to say thank you very much.
Thanks for the incredibly kind words. Hey, so again, welcome to Unite. We're going to have 3 fantastic days, loads of sessions, loads of learning, lots of social things going on. Please, you know, make sure to connect with each other, connect with our team, make friends. It's the most wonderful group of people I can imagine here. And, you know, tomorrow evening, we'll have the cocktail hour. We'll have Unity Awards, which is going to be mind-blowing. Last year, I think I said that every single game from last year's awards could have won all the awards from any previous year. And I think that'll be the case again this year. And then, of course, after the awards, there's the party. And after the party, there's another day and a night and whatnot. And it's going to be crazy. So thank you so much for being with us. Enjoy. And I'm looking forward to spending time with you. Cheers.